everyone, and welcome back to my channel for the very exciting 2023 What Did I Read wrap up. This is the favorite time of the year for most people, although that was probably actually like 4 weeks ago at the beginning of the year where most booktubers do this, but I'm always delayed. That's okay. You guys, if you watch my channel, you're used to it. You know I don't follow the trends, right? But yeah, I'm super excited because once you do the wrap up of 2023, it's a good way to sort of remind yourself of all the great reads you've had. And for me, it definitely helps to be like, wait, no, I had a really good reading year despite what I might have thought. But also just like knowing that once this is done, I get to start afresh and I get to look forward to a new year. And like even just the idea of putting all of these and organizing them back into my shelves is really exciting. It also means that this shelf right here is empty because that means that's the shelf where I put books as I read throughout the year to just keep them all in one place for exactly the wrap up. So I know exactly what I'm reading. So it's always nice to have this start blank and empty, and then I get to fill it up as the year passes on. So super excited. Let's get on to the stats, and then I'll discuss, favorites, unfavorites, things like that. So this year, let's start with how many books did I read. I read 37 books. I'm definitely on the lower side for booktube, but that's fine. For books, for when it comes to reading, it's never about quantity, it's always about quality. It's also about going at your pace, what you're comfortable with. It's also, things are so dependent on your lifestyle, how you're doing. Me personally, 2023 was actually quite of a difficult year. I don't talk about that. It's not something you guys need to know, but I was having a difficult year, and I for the first half of the year, I was just mentally out. I was just gone. I think it was probably more noticeable that my reading picked up in the second half of the year as things got a little better. But 2023 honestly was not a good year for me, but I definitely feel much better and I'm excited about 2024. So yeah, 37 books only in 2023, but I'm still very happy about that because I actually, surprisingly enough, read more than 2022, and I actually read more pages because the books I read were longer. So even though the quantity of books doesn't seem like that much, I actually read quite a bit, considering the circumstances. So still very exciting. 4 of those 37 books were nonfiction. The other 33 were fiction. That is actually kind of going against my current trends. I've been really interested in nonfiction lately, but I think it's just that I've my nonfiction TBR dwindled and there was nothing I could pull, so I went for fiction instead. But if you've just watched my book haul, you'll see that I have officially replenished my nonfiction TBR, so there's going to be a lot to choose from this year. That's exciting. Out of the 37 total books, 2 of them were DNFs. The Old Ways by Robert Macfarlane, which I'm going to tell you now I was very disappointed in, or it's just not, it didn't go in the way that I wanted it to go, or it's not what I was expecting, or it's not what I was hoping from the book. So I ended up just DNFing after about 100 pages. Also, Yasunari Kawabata, Pays de Neige, or Snow Country, his most famous work, DNF'd because this just sealed the deal that Kawabata is just not the author for me. I don't enjoy him, and I'm just not going to read from him for another decade, or at least, because we don't get along. I read 11 female authors to 22 male authors. Some of those male authors are no, that's right. I was going to say they're repeats, but I didn't count the repeats, so that doesn't matter. Yeah, 11 female authors to 22 male authors. This isn't something I actively follow. It's not something that I actively pursue. Sometimes there are more female authors. Like last year, there were more female authors. Sometimes it's a perfect 50-50 split. For me, there's no real bias in my reading in those terms, so I always feel comfortable with what I read. An interesting statistic though that I do like was the fact that 17 of the authors that I read this year were new to me. They were the first time I was reading their books, and I definitely found some new authors that I am very excited about. or well, some of them, they're authors that they only have one work, so it doesn't really matter. But there are definitely works that I will want to revisit if they ever have other works. But yeah, so 17 new to me authors, 12 repeat authors. The repeat authors tend to be either Japanese or French. For example, Jules Verne or Zola or Kawabata's a repeat, Shusaku Endo's a repeat, Amélie Nothom's a repeat. So books, like usually the repeat authors, I usually at least read one book from those authors per year. So yeah, I think it's I think that's a really good a good mix of having so many new to me authors. It shows that I'm still willing to explore new authors, because I think way back when I was still trying to discover my tastes, I did have a tendency to just stick with the same author. So I love that I'm experimenting more. The total pages I read this year was 10,125 pages, which averages out to about 28 pages per day. That's always actually very surprising to me, because there are days where I tend to kind of either binge read or I tend to not read at all. So when I binge read, I'm usually reading like 60, 70, 80 pages per day, and then I won't read for like a week. So it's always interesting to see the final result of, well, if you only read 28 pages a day, it would probably be better in terms of like reading consistency. But in any case, I think it's very interesting that, yeah, you don't even need that much. You don't need to read that much page wise to get to be able to go through a lot of books. I think a lot of people who don't read that much expect yourself to have to read 3 hours a day, or if you're not reading 100 pages a day, then are you really a reader? No, you can just go at your own pace, and it doesn't take that much to read a lot of books. So that's always very fun. Now, this year I had an even split of language. I read 18 books in French and I read 19 books in English. I really like that. It's always good for me to keep my French up and not be totally dominated by English. The only thing that's obviously lacking is Japanese. This year was just not the year for me reading Japanese. It just didn't happen. So hopefully in 2024, we will go back and read some Japanese. Now, the shortest books that I read in this year was one, La pêche au toc dans le Tohoku by Shinsuke Numata, so Fishing in Tohoku. This was an Akutagawa Prize winner. I didn't really like this one, but this is the shortest book that I had at 100 pages. Then I had a short story, a very small short story anthology. These are the Folio 2 € classics in France, where usually they're either very short novellas or they give you like samplings of short stories, which I really like, and it's only 2 €. So it's a great way to get a feel for new authors and to experiment. But this came in at 107 pages. Then the longest book that I read this year, which I don't have because I read it via online, I read it via ebook from Project Gutenberg, but the longest book that I read this year was Leo Tolstoy's Anna Karenina, which fell at 740 pages, and that was a really fun read, because I consistently read that like every day for maybe about 2 months. But every day at work I was reading from it, and I finished it quite quickly, and that was just a great way to easily and smoothly and comfortably get through such a long classic, and then also because the fact that Anna Karenina, she can be admittedly a very tiring character for a good reason. She has a lot of emotions that she's processing and going through, and her situation is very stressful. So it makes sense that just as she is tired, we'll be tired with her. So I think reading it a little bit every day consistently really made the book a lot more enjoyable, compared to if I had tried to binge read it in like 3 weeks or something. I think I would have gotten a little bit tired. But yeah, so that was an excellent way to read a good book, good long book. So 740 pages was the longest book that I read. The average page length of the books I was reading was 285 pages, which is actually, again, as I mentioned at the beginning of this video, it is more than the previous year, because this year I definitely was reading longer books, typically thanks to the classics I was reading, because I read a lot of classics this year. In terms of publication date, the oldest books that I read 2 plays tend to, and 2 classic French plays that tend to be quite old. The first, Lucide by Pierre Corneille, is from 1636. Really enjoyed this. And then the other one was Don Juan by Molière, which is from 1665. They were just, I don't know, I'm really into French plays these days, and I think I can't wait to get through many more of these classics. Although I don't have any, unfortunately, I only have one on my TBR for this year. But yeah, I've been really into French plays recently. I think part of it is just wanting to know what French people at school read, because even though I'm French, I never lived in France, so I never got the traditional French education that my cousins got. So I feel like I'm catching up to what they had to read at school, but because I'm choosing to read them and I'm reading them as an adult, I think I get to enjoy them more. But it's been really fun. So those are the 2 oldest books that I read. The newest book that I read, and the only book that I read that was published in the year 2023, was the nonfiction Alpiniste de Main by Cédric Gras. This was so much fun to read. It's about just the origin of the sport of alpinism, which began under Mao's communist China, because Mao was obsessed with bringing China to the forefront of the world and trying to like impress everyone and show them that China was the best at everything. And so they basically like stuck these Chinese people, like just randomly chose some Chinese citizens to send them to Mount Everest, even though they had never like climbed or even seen a mountain before. So this is a book about the birth of the sport in China and sort of the disaster, which was to expected, of their attempts of climbing Mount Everest, that even though they did succeed, there were a lot of sacrifices to get that to that point. So this is the book I picked up, published in 2023, and I absolutely loved it. I thought it was fantastic, really fun. I really hope this gets translated into English so that all of you guys can read it as well. In terms of reading through my TBR pile, so I read quite the books I've read haven't been on my TBR for that long. TBR for me, I should reiterate, means physical, actual physical books that I own. It does not include like wish list books. So only like a book doesn't become my TBR until I actually physically own it. So there were 9 books that I read that I purchased in 2023, 11 from 2022, 11 from 2021, and then I have 3 from 2020, and then after that from 2016, 17, and 18, I have 1 book each. So I'm very happy that I am actively reading through the books that I've accumulated the most recently, because it makes sense. If you're buying something new, that should mean you want to read it like immediately. There's no reason to buy something new and just have it languish on your TBR for years. So I like the fact that my reading comes so much from my recent purchases. Like that's ideal. That's what I want. So very excited about that. In terms of though, because I know when I watch BookTube, I watch these massive book hauls like every single month. People buying 10, 15 books, and it makes sense. Like it's totally okay when people are reading 10 to 15 books a month, but it would be an issue for me if I did that. If I were buying 10 to 15 books per month when I only read 2 or 3, that would be really disastrous. So I think it's definitely good to take a look at your book hauls and then look at what you're actually reading from those book hauls. And it turns out, so I bought 22 physical books in 2023, and I read 6 out of those 22. Now I did read a 7th book. I tried to read a book from Tibet called Tempête Rouge, which means the Red Storm, by Sheridan. But the book was, I can't tell if it was that I wasn't in the mood or if it was just very difficult to read. Sometimes if you're not in the mood, your brain's not working properly, the gears aren't moving, and so you might be reading the words but you're not actually absorbing them. But So I don't know if it's just that or if it actually just, no, the book actually is kind of difficult to read. So I did start a 7th book, but I did put it down after like 15 pages because I was like, this is not happening, it's not working. So that book right now is back on my shelves for a later date, and I'll try again. But so yeah, so in terms of how many books remain for my 2023 book haul, there are 16 books that are remaining. But I think that's still pretty good. I still think that's pretty good. I mean, I didn't buy that many books to begin with. And then because it wasn't, the most productive reading year, the fact that I still managed to read or at least try 7 books from those purchases, I think is still very, very good. So I'm still happy about that. Comparing previous years, 2022, I had bought 58 books. I remember because I had a huge French language book haul. But yeah, in 2020, I had 58 books. There are 32 books still remaining from that book haul, but I'm still okay with that because I would say maybe at least like 10 or 15 of those books are books from like a collection. So for example, I collect these editions of Jules Verne classic books. And so every time I'm in France, I like buy 10 or up to like 15 of these books. I buy what I can find when I can find them because you'll never know if you'll see them again. And so that's a collection, and these are books that I read very regularly and consistently. So I'm okay accumulating those books because I know they're going to get read. So even though I had 32 books still remaining from last year's book hauls, in reality, there's probably only like 20 or so that are actually like non-collection type books. So I'm still very happy about that number. I'm okay with that. Now, what's really even better though is in 2021 I had purchased 62 books, which seems ridiculous. But there are only 16 books remaining from 2021 in those book hauls. And once again, some of those are probably Zola books, so those are in a series and I'm reading them in order, so I can't read them right now, but I purchased them, so I'll have them once I get to that book. So again, I'm very, very happy about that. I think it shows that I'm actually quite good at controlling my spending. Again, if you've been watching my channel, you'll notice I have like 2 book hauls a year. That's it. I'm not a monthly book haul person. That's just impossible. It doesn't fit my personality, but I'm very realistic about how much I read in a year, which means I'm only gonna buy so much in a year. So very happy about that. I'm even happier because again, last 2021, I bought an average of 60 books those year, and I only bought 22 last year. Like in 2023, that's amazing. That's really, really good. That's like pat on the shoulder, excellent control, excellent. So very exciting. So let's compare my TBR at the beginning of the year versus the end of the year. The Spanish books stayed the same at 3. I read no books in Spanish. My Japanese books went from 39 to 38. Why do you wonder? How did that happen when I didn't read any Japanese books? Well, I purchased 1 and I got rid of 2. There was 1 book that was supposed to be for a book club that ended up being too difficult to read, so we abandoned it, and it wasn't a book I was super interested in, so I decided I'm just going to get rid of it. And then there's another book actually over the holidays. I brought it back to Texas to read, and I read like 20 pages and I'm like, you know what, actually I'm not into this book. It's not the book I thought it would be. It's not the book I wanted it to be, so I decided to give those away. So I went down 1 Japanese book, even though I didn't read any. But at least I tried. Like, I did try. I have tried reading. Wasn't a good year for me, so I didn't get to go anywhere. But at least I tried. I do always try. So that's where the Japanese books stand. But still like 38 books. And actually, I'm just unhauling those 2. There is no actually. So moving on to the French books. French books, I definitely, I went from 78 to 80 because I had that really large French book haul. Basically the book haul from this past year was, it was when I purchased all those French books when I went back to France. So that's fairly normal. I was expecting that. That's okay. Because again, I have a TBR of 80. I would say maybe almost 30 books or so are part of like collection books. So they're books that that aren't ready to read now, but I own them. So I'm still very comfortable with that number, totally happy. Now, English is what I killed it. I really killed it last year. I started the year with 50 books, and then I ended with 39 books on my TBR. So excellent. That the English TBR definitely dwindled significantly. So basically at the beginning of 2023, I had 170 books on my TBR pile. At the end of the year, I have 160 books on my TBR pile. So I actually have a net decrease in books. So very exciting. I think that is very good. And again, 160 books on a TBR pile might seem like a lot for some people, but I do read in 4 languages, and I need a stockpile in all those languages because I don't, it's not very accessible for me living in Japan to have the ability to buy English books whenever I want or French books whenever I want. So it's better for me to have a stockpile compared to other people who might only read English and they live in an English speaking country, and so they can buy English books whenever they want. So there's no reason to create a stockpile. So I'm very excited and very happy with those numbers. All right, in terms of publication date, I read 13 books from between 2000 and 2023. I read 6 books from 1950 to 2000, 5 books from 1900 to 1950, 9 books from 1850 to 1900, 1 book from 1800 to 1850, and then 3 books pre-1800s. This year, I definitely read a lot more classics. I read Shirley. I finished reading the story of The Stone, the famous Chinese classic. I finally read that 5th volume that I kept putting off. I read Uncle Silas. I read Dracula. I read Anna Karenina. So I definitely had fun with some classics. I read the 2 French plays. I read some Zola. I read some Jules Verne. So I definitely found a lot of comfort visiting books that are very well established, that are very well known, that are almost guaranteed to have excellent writing and a page-turning plot, etc., etc. So those books were very successful for me in 2023. In terms of countries, so and this includes nonfiction, I definitely have my interests these days mostly follow Japan because I live in Japan. I speak Japanese. It's always been my passion. France because I am French and I like to be part of my own culture. And then my current interest with Chinese history and literature definitely makes that one of the high priorities. So those 3 are always going to come up on top with my reading. And this year, 2023 was no exception. I read 11 books from Japan, 7 from France, 5 from China. Then I read 4 from England, 3 from Ireland, 3 from the US, 1 from Norway, 1 book from Russia, 1 book from Scotland, and 1 book from Belgium. And Belgium is always Amélie Nothomb. I haven't read any Belgian books other than Amélie Nothom's books, but she's always there every single year. One of her books is always on my read list. So, all right, so those are all these statistics. Let's get into sort of just more fun categories. How about best cover? I would say the best cover comes from nonfiction, Alpiniste de Mal by Cédric Gras, the book about the alpinism in China. For me, this is the best cover, because I think it's just wonderful. And I love, like, it's almost hilarious because you have the one of the climbers carrying the bust of Mao, which is rumored that when they finally conquered Everest, they put Mao's bust on the top of the summit of Mount Everest, but it's never been found. And so people are always like, did you guys really like make it to the peak, etc., etc. So it's always kind of like a joke, and I think it's hilarious. But I think the reason also that's the best cover is that immediately when I saw the cover in the bookstore when I was in France, like my eyes went immediately to it and it made me immediately want to pick up the book. So the power of this cover is what made me notice it in the bookstore. So I think that deserves praise, I think is the word I'm looking for. this is actually just sitting behind me. It wasn't on my list, but I do quite like the cover to Empire of the Summer Moon. I like these brassy tones, these brown tones. This is a gorgeous photo of Quanah Parker. I think he looks majestic and so handsome, and just really, really absolutely beautiful man. But just such a presence, you know, on this cover. And so I think this is really, really absolutely gorgeous as well. So those are my favorite covers for nonfiction. For fiction, I don't have like a like absolutely best cover, but there are a few that definitely stand out a little bit more for me. I did say I really like the cover to Life for Sale from Yukio Mishima. I think the cover, the cover is very evocative of the chaos of this book. I like the use of color. I like the kind of the absurdity of all the schools. I just think it's very apt description of what you're going to get when you're reading this book, just the absolute chaos. I think that would probably be my favorite, but there are two more that I quite like. So I really love the cover for Autour de la Lune, so Around the Moon by Jules Verne. I collect these editions. So it's basically what they are is that it has the traditional illustrations used for Jules Verne's books, and what they always do is they always paste them. For these classic covers, they paste them over an actual real photo. So here it's Around the Moon. Now you can kind of see the same thing with this one and the same thing with this one. But there's something about Around the Moon. I just think the placement of sort of not of the moon not having it fully folding the cover with this beautiful illustration over it. There's just something about like the proportions to this cover that makes me really makes it stand out more than the others, even if it was a book that I didn't really like. It's one of the Jules Verne's where I'm like, no, didn't really like that one. Kind of rare, but you know, there's always going to be weaker books by your favorite authors. It's going to happen. That's just how it works. And then I also like the covers that John Wyndham gets to his books. I think this cover for the Midwich Cuckoos, it's very like terrifying. It really makes you want to know what's going on, what's the significance of the bird and things like that. I think his book covers are always very evocative and really make you want to pick them up. Now, if you watched my book haul from last week, I picked up two new John Wyndhams, and they have new covers. So you compare these covers with the older ones. I do prefer these now. If I read these in 2024, I can tell you now these are probably gonna be my favorite covers of the year. That's my prediction. But in any case, these new covers made me want to rebuy this book and the Day of the Triffids in these versions, because these are absolutely beautiful, but I refrained. But in any case, even these older editions, I just think John Wyndham's books always get really, really amazing illustrations for the covers. I think his books deserve it. So very, very exciting. Really, really love that. Then we're going to say what is my favorite book of the year. I have to say, and I think because it was the most page turning, it was the one that really gripped me the most and really surprised me the most. I would say it's Dracula by Bram Stoker. I just think, I'm getting a little comfortable. I need to shift my weight. I just think this book was just so much fun. It was thrilling. It was genuinely frightening. I thought it just really, I mean, Dracula is such a intensely popular character in all media these days, and there's so many variations of that character, but it turns out none of them compare to the original work. Like, the original work is absolutely fantastic. I love this. I devoured it. I couldn't put it down. I didn't want to put it down. I really just absolutely love this. I thought it was absolutely wonderful, super fantastic, and this was easily my favorite of the year. it was just too good. It was just too good. I'm trying to look at the other books that I read to see if like they really compare. No, they don't. In terms of nonfiction, I would say, I don't know, Empire of the Summer Moon I think was probably my favorite. I think it was the most thought out, fleshed out. It was the most well written. And then obviously Quanah Parker and the story, which actually Quanah Parker only really shows up until the last third of the book, but the story of his mother, Mary Parker, and etc., was just absolutely fascinating. So I think this was an excellent nonfiction. But this, just because of the topic and the absurdity, there was quite a bit of like biting humor that kind of poked fun of Mao and, you know, communist China, which I think is, you know, it makes sense. Like when you actually read the story and like think about like the idea of sending people to Mount Everest, even though they've never even climbed like their local mountain, is just so absurd and ridiculous. It's like, it makes sense to poke fun of that a little bit. So these nonfiction books, I also absolutely really enjoyed. I think they were just really well done, and I think anyone would really enjoy them. I think you don't need to be limited to these topics to enjoy those nonfiction. I think they're just really fantastic. Most disappointing books, I would say, again, I was really disappointed in The Old Ways by Margaret Macfarlane. This is a book about him walking around. It's not even really about him walking around England. I wanted it to be a book about him walking around England, but it was more a book that follows the tradition of walking, but not even the tradition of walking, but even just like more so the tradition of the past, the walkways, the tracks, and the past that just form all these walkways in Britain. So for me, it was the topic of interest. The topic of the book, just the focus wasn't the focus of the book wasn't on the part that I wanted. I wanted more from Robert Macfarlane himself, and the parts where he talks about his experiences were fantastic. They were full of wonderful humor, fantastic wit. They were beautifully written, and those parts I absolutely love. But the thing is that like they were so few that I had to get through a lot of what I didn't want to read to get to his parts. And that's when I decided to just part ways with this book, because it just wasn't worth it at that point. So I was a little disappointed in that. And then this book, My Year of Rest and Relaxation by Otessa Moshfegh, I can't even say this was a disappointment. I kind of more so had like not so much expectation, but I was more cognizant of the fact before picking up this book that there was a chance I wouldn't like this book. There was a chance that this book was very much a question of experimentation, and it was more a book I wanted to read out of curiosity to see what people were enjoying so much about this book that's so well loved, or it's very much talked about. But I kind of had an inkling as to which side I was going to fall on. And I did fall on the side where it's like, yeah, I didn't really like this that much, or even at all. So kind of expected that one, but yeah, it's still disappointing because, I mean, even if you have an inkling as to your preferences to a book before you read it, you still want it to be good. You want your expectations to be disproven. You want it to be like, you know what, actually that was wonderful. Why was I so stupid? Instead of, oh no, I was kind of right, you know? Then finally, another book I was kind of disappointed in was Inheritance from Mother by Minae Mizumura. This is a book that had all the keywords that I tend to like in Japanese fiction, talking about the hardships of women in society, especially Japanese society, and everything they have to put up with and go through, all the responsibility that they are expected to take on. And then this was like kind of dealing with like hardships of having a sick mother and dealing with the end of days of your mother and things like that. Like I was really expecting a lot from this book, but it ended up just being too long. And I think it could have benefited from a lot of editing. So a little bit disappointed in this one. So that was kind of it for my reading for nonfiction and fiction. I did have one fun experiment. Sorry, I knocked the tripod, so I'm gonna be moving a little bit. But I did have, you know, a little fun, even though it was my favorite. I did enjoy the experience of finally reading a literary magazine. This is the magazine of Monkey, which is basically Japanese short stories. There are photos that are absolutely beautiful, illustrations, etc. It's so well put together. This is absolutely beautiful. Didn't really 100% love the short stories that were in here, but it was a really, really wonderful experience to read this. So that was fantastic. So to end off, really quickly, I'll just mention the manga that I read in 2023. I forgot to pull it from my shelf, so I'm just gonna have to tell you. But this, again, I wasn't reading in Japanese this year, so I only read 21 manga volumes, which is very, very low for me, but I see that changing in 2024. I'm not too concerned if this happens. But I read volume 11 of Goku Shifudo, which is The Way of the House Husband. I read the entire series 1 through 12 of Yu Yu Hakusho. I read volumes 2 through 4 of a delightful little slice of life manga called Kujima Utaeba Ie Hororo. It hasn't been translated into English yet, but it's just a beautiful little story. I read the first 4 volumes of Love Hina, or Love Hina, and then I read volume 101 of the French translation of Detective Conan. And then I was very good with manga purchasing. I only bought 5 manga in 2023 because my whole deal was basically that I was only going to purchase manga if it was the continuation of a series that's ongoing and that I'm actively reading. So I did very well. I only bought 5 and I read 3 of those 5. So I'm on track, and I even have plans in the next few days to read the 4th of those 5. So very exciting. I was very happy, at least, that I was realistic. I made the proper observation that, you know what, I'm not reading manga this year, so I'm not going to buy any. So very, very happy with that. And yeah, there we go. That is everything for 2023. Thank you so much for being here with me this year. The talking with you guys in the comments was absolutely fantastic, amazing. I love that. I love the conversations we have. I loved when you guys were sharing your thoughts. Majority, probably 99.9% positive about the recommendations I've made, where you've picked up the books and you really love them just as much as I did. Absolutely, that makes me so happy. It's the whole reason I wanted to start this channel, and so the whole reason I've been continuing to do this channel. So that's been really a wonderful experience. And yeah, I just wanted to thank you so much for 2023, and I'm going to thank you in advance for 2024. So excited for the new year. Again, thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you next time. Bye!